I don't know if you guys have heard this yet, but Klay Thompson is not going back to Golden State next year. He's going to go to the Dallas Mavericks. Has anyone heard? Has anyone talked about this? Yeah, so obviously that is not breaking news. That is several weeks old. I just thought it would be fun to re-examine the departure of Klay Thompson through the lens of one of the NBA's great prolific dynasties losing one of its core emotional pillars the way that Klay Thompson has been for Golden State for the past decade or so, because it's a pretty rare occurrence. It's not that rare for the relationship between a player and a team to sour the way that Klay Thompson and the Warriors has gone. Money rears its head in very ugly ways pretty routinely in the NBA. It is rare to encounter a team like Golden State that reached the highest heights the Warriors did and was as good for as long as the Warriors were. And even among those teams, those select few teams throughout NBA history, this Klay departure still feels like a unique situation where if you go back through the years, Tony Parker walks from the San Antonio Spurs for the Charlotte Hornets in 2019. First of all, Tony Parker, not the best teammate in the world, pretty well documented, so it immediately feels like a little bit of a different situation. But he also retires the year after, like he's immediately done after leaving the Spurs. Whatever you want to say about Klay, where he's currently at in his career, obviously not the same player he once was. It would be shocking if he retires after next season. It does not feel like we're a year out from a decision like that. So if you go before the Tony Parker move, then it kind of takes you into, I guess, the LeBron, Wade, Bosh, Heat era. I don't even know if they're really like a dynasty, but even if we give them that title, just for the sake of argument, I don't think the city of Miami ever really developed the same emotional connection with LeBron or Chris Bosh. Maybe a little bit with Chris Bosh, but the emotional connection between the Bay Area and Klay Thompson is glaringly apparent to anybody who's been locked into basketball for the last 8, 10, 12 years, whatever. That Miami team feels a little bit different. If you go to the Lakers teams of the mid-2000s, it is absolutely a dynasty, but it's also two very separate, distinct runs with distinct personnel, play styles, whatever. Really only connected by Kobe Bryant and a handful of role players. And while there is some interesting emotional stuff with how Shaquille O'Neal exited from the Lakers and went to the Miami Heat, there was a little bit of love lost between him and Lakers fans, it felt like, as the relationship between him and Kobe Bryant came to a head. A little bit of documented beef there. And then if you go back before the Lakers, I guess that takes you into Scottie Pippen leaving the Bulls in 98, which there was no real emotional illusions with that team as to whether or not all of the core guys were going to ride off into the sunset together as Chicago lifers. They made a documentary titled The Last Dance about how they knew it was the last dance going into that season. That feels very different from where we're at with the Golden State Core 3. Even 2 years ago, if you asked me at that point, do these guys retire as Warriors together, I would have been absolutely. And if they move off one of their core guys, it would be in a big blockbuster trade in order to facilitate one more real shot at the championship for Steph Curry. That's what I would figure happened if you told me Klay or Draymond did not retire as a Warrior. And so for it to end in this way, just kind of in a way that doesn't really massively benefit Klay or the Warriors. It doesn't feel like anybody's super happy with this parting of ways or massively benefiting from it. It's just bizarre, because does it give Klay Thompson another couple of shots at deep postseason runs? Absolutely. That's on the table with the Mavs. I am still withholding judgment as to whether or not the Mavs are getting hugely better, swapping him out for Derek Jones Jr. And regardless, the West is going to be really, really difficult over the next couple of seasons. But it's a good postseason setting for Klay. He will have chances to have big games deep in the postseason. At the same time, throughout the entirety of these contract negotiations, it has felt like if the money had just been there from the start in Golden State, if they had just been willing to pay him, he probably would have taken that money and stayed in Golden State. It felt like he wanted to be a lifer there, and shit just did not work out that way. If you approach this from the perspective of the Warriors, does this move really move the needle for them in terms of giving Steph one more shot at an NBA championship? Absolutely not. Again, even though Klay is not the same version of himself that he was even like 3 or 4, I guess, before the injuries. Even though Klay's not that guy anymore, losing somebody who's like 18 points per game on really, really good three-point shooting for second-round picks tantamount to nothing, yeah, that's going to set the team back. And now you're looking to a bunch of very young, inexperienced guys who admittedly are good. I like Kuminga. I like Podziemski. You're looking to those guys for enormous contributions. And that's not even addressing the fact that they lost Chris Paul. And on top of both of those things, to take like a little bit more of a legacy-pilled angle to all of this, which I don't usually do, I think all-time rankings and discussions can get pretty tired pretty fast. It's just strange for the legacy of both Klay Thompson and this entire era of Golden State Warriors basketball that the big three, for better or for worse, whatever happens with every player and team involved in this stuff right now, the big three did not play their entire careers together. Klay Thompson did not play his entire career as a Golden State Warrior. It felt avoidable. The Warriors could have just rode off into the sunset with one of the defining second-tier players over the last decade or so of basketball, and they just didn't do that. And with the defining player stuff, I understand Klay Thompson existed way more on the fringes of all-star selections, all-NBA selections, than he did on the fringes of, like, MVP discussions. He was still so good for so long for Golden State. I feel like he's pretty clearly the GOAT 3-and-D player. I know that's a label that's some people kind of take offense to. They feel like it boils down his skills to a role player status. I don't think that's the case. I think really his super high level NBA skills for the most successful portions of his career were shooting three-pointers at a historical clip and being a well above average defender. He was great some seasons. I think he would probably have like 4 or 5 all defensive third team selections to his name if that was a position that was available. I know he has 1 all defensive selection in 2019, and I don't think the Warriors defense, which I think is the thing that drove them to be so successful for so long, is the same if he is not so capable on the perimeter, even though most of the glory on that end obviously goes to Draymond Green. He's also possibly the GOAT hot hand scorer, which is an archetype that is really, really good at endearing yourselves to fans. I think that shone through in how much Golden State liked him, even though the relationship got bad towards the end, and how many fans there were of him in the postseason throughout the best portions of his career, even though a lot of NBA fans have kind of turned on him in recent years. For a guy like that, especially through the most prolific seasons of Klay's career, it doesn't really matter if you have like a mid-stretch as long as you break out of it in a really memorable way, and I feel like that description fits Klay Thompson to a T. I feel like some of his most memorable playoff games, specifically Game 6 in Oklahoma City in 2016, really take that label and push it to the max, where heading into that Game 6 throughout the Oklahoma City series, he was averaging like 22 points on 40, 30, 90 shooting splits. He was not playing particularly good basketball, but he emerges out of the series a legend, a hero, one of the defining moments of his career. 41 points on like 60-something% true shooting, incredible efficiency, 19 points in the fourth quarter alone to keep the season alive, to keep this 73-9 insane legacy thing alive that obviously we know didn't end up working out, but it's still something that stuck with Klay for years after that. No matter, like, he didn't really play legendary in a ton of Game 6s, I feel like, but that specific one, coupled with a few others, really gave him this massive, massive legacy. And I don't know, it's just very strange that he and Golden State parted ways in that fashion. That is to very little benefit for either side. It's strange, to be honest, that Golden State didn't want to keep him around, didn't feel comfortable paying him, even though I guess his level of play has fallen off a little bit. I guess they're trying to give Steph that one more run. This does not feel like the move that pushes them in the right direction. This feels like a pretty solid mishandling of what Klay Thompson was as an asset, and also what he was as like a part of your franchise, a part of your franchise's history. It feels like you fumbled it in both regards a little bit. And so, I don't know. I guess my point, time marches forward. Always. And so if you have a favorite player on your favorite team, enjoy watching them. Be mindful. Open yourself up and capture these fleeting moments that you can look back on fondly, because in the NBA, things change very, very, very rapidly.